So this session is all about taking a stand. So now more than ever, consumers expect the brands they buy from to stand for something. Yet at the same time, audiences are increasingly savvy about greenwashing, sport washing, and other fluffy distractions. So how do brands decide where to make their stand, and should they? So if you were in the last session, this is really poignant as well. And how do you start carving out an activist streak? And how do you make sure it fits in with your wider strategy? Or indeed should you? So what are the pros and what are the pitfalls? So our panelists are, we've got Luke and Broster from Patagonia. Do you know Patagonia? Yeah? Just making sure. We've got Kyle Sue from B Lab and Better Business Act.
I paid those people.
We've got Malin. We've got Malin Cunningham from, is it Hat-Trick? Yes. So yeah, it's up there. Fantastic. See, tech does work when it's meant to work right. And Malin is part of the Better Business Network as well. And then we also have Graeme Hayes from Manchester Metropolitan University. So a big round of applause and welcome to our panellists. So normally I would go through a big whole biog, but we haven't got time at all. But Luke, I want to start with you about inspiring activism. So I'm excited to talk to in detail about how brands, bricks and mortar retail stores can inspire activism and positive action. Is that possible?
Yeah.
Expand.
Yes, it is. I'm very lucky to work for a brand with a very clear mission. We are in business to save our home planet, and that informs every single decision we make. So that informs the people we hire. If I've got two candidates coming for a job and one of them's more passionate about saving the planet, you can guess who's going to get the job. That makes it really authentic when we do want to take a stand and when we do want to be a part of our community and we want to kind of show what we're about. And we're very lucky that when anyone starts with Patagonia on your first day, you're informed with no uncertain terms that the retail store exists to be a gift to the community. That can change quite a lot. Community evolves, it shifts, its needs and demands change, but we always have the freedom to come back to that. And I think I think there's maybe what I'm kind of getting to here is I think if you're a brand and you're looking to do that sort of stuff, you may be scared of doing it for fear of being labeled as greenwashing or anything like that. But when you do it consistently and when you do stuff behind the scenes as well, it's not always a marketing exercise. It's not always needing a photographer there to sort of shout about what we're doing. We can do that and we can be that change. Yeah, sorry, I'm rambling a little bit there. But
What is greenwashing?
What is greenwashing? It is, for me, anyway, certainly within the industry I work in, trying to cash in on a movement. Yeah, it's trying to sort of artificially be a part of that to boost short-term sales, essentially. In our industry, we produce clothing. We're very keen to say that what we do isn't sustainable, but we try and do it as responsibly as we can. And part of that is developing technologies that reduce waste, that reduce the amount of virgin oil that we're using. And one of the key things we do is we share that technology with other brands and other manufacturers. It's not just for Patagonia's use, but we want other outdoor manufacturers to use that.
And Malin, can you tell us a little bit about Hat-Trick, please?
So I run Hat-Trick, and we are a content marketing agency, and we specialize in the built environment. And part of what we do, sort of our impact side of the business, is helping businesses understand sort of why sustainability matters, essentially, because obviously it's a huge issue in the built environment. And we do that by running the carbon literacy courses, which I'm sure a lot of you have heard of. And we do one specifically for sales and marketing teams in the built environment. And part of that is what you just talked about, is helping them understand what is greenwashing, how do you avoid that as a brand and as a business, so that you don't get caught out, basically, and that what you're talking to your customers about is genuine and what you're actually doing. Yeah.
And it leads me nicely to you, Kyle, about this B Corp movement that's happening right now. So for anyone in this room, what is B Corp?
Yeah, sure. Can I get a show of hands? Who hasn't heard of B Corp?
Fantastic.
Thanks.
Fantastic. Kyle, you're not meant to spoil it.
No, it's all right. So I need to gauge the audience because I can jettison a part of the spiel.
But sometimes as well, this is, what the funny thing is, it's interesting because so this will always happen, not always happens, but I guarantee there'll be a few people in this room that don't know B Corp, but they're too embarrassed to show their hands. And then when it's time for you to actually talk to them, they'll come near the end and go, so how do I get B Corp? What did it do? So give me just a slight overview.
I'll definitely explain it. Thank you. Our marketing communications team are going to be very happy with that result. But yeah, I'll go into a bit of detail about it. So essentially the B Corp movement has this vision, or it starts from this particular point, which is essentially the economic system, which we all know and maybe love, is broken. We have deep-rooted problems, systemic issues, which have been here and kind of been accelerating, being exacerbated by the current way that we operate. And so what we want to do is say, actually, let's stop, take stock, and change. And so we have our vision, which is an economic system which is regenerative, equitable, and inclusive. And those are the sort of three watchwords that guide what we do. So that's the B Corp movement. I work at B Lab UK. We're part of the B Lab community, so we're the charities and not-for-profits globally that help to push the B Corp movement. Businesses that want to join us on this mission are those that can go on that journey to become a B Corp. So that's kind of the definitions out of the way. But yeah, the B Corp movement is really sort of gaining momentum. If I was asking this question maybe even a couple of years ago, I'd probably see a few more hands here. So more and more people are switching on to the need for change and sort of putting business at the center of that, recognizing that businesses have been contributors to a lot of these challenges we've seen through business practice and through the systems which exist, but can also really demonstrate the leadership to change. And what we're trying to do with the B Corp movement is really create kind of a catalyst, but a subset of businesses, representative samples of those organizations which are practicing what they preach and actually thriving. And so we're moving away that actually business being a force for good isn't something that just affects the bottom line. You have to make a decision between growing and being good. The two actually suffuse and can actually mutually reinforce each other, as you can see with Patagonia and all the range of other businesses in our community as well. So hopefully that expands a bit more on that answer.
It kind of reminds me a little bit of, there was a time when people wanted to get the, investments in people stamp, I think with the B Corp movement, some people tell me it's so hard. The people that I know who've got B Corp will have all said it is so hard, like the paperwork and what you've got to go through. But what is the process and how long does it take? And is it according to individual companies or what is the process?
Yeah, there are some B leaders in this room who can also expand on this as well. So if you've got any further questions. So, it is a rigorous process, and I think that's nothing to shy away from. Sometimes we get questions, how can we make it easier and things like that. It's like, change is hard. Changing a system is very hard. It is complex, and we have to change our own individual behaviours and those of businesses. So we're not going to shy away from it. We're going to lean into it. And so in terms of that rigorousness, excuse me, I'll talk a bit about that first, and I'll talk about the technical process. So one of the things that kind of is a hallmark is this, the fact it's intensive. It's not just looking at environmental considerations, it's looking at social. And it's looking at how you look after your communities, your customers, your workers, and what are the governance structures as well that guide how a business operates. Those are all interconnected. but I don't know if you've been part of a change management program in your business. Yeah, how many of those 60? You know, there's lots of deep-rooted challenges around this space, and it takes time. So with the impact assessment, it's kind of there as a guide for businesses. So I think for particularly SMEs, use our impact assessment tool. It's a free tool the business can sign up to, and that's the kind of the guide, and we've talked about it being a roadmap for organisations. So I'd love to hear from like Malin and Luke about the experience that they've gone through living and breathing this. But the impact assessment is a starting point for businesses to become a B Corp. And essentially, there's a lot of questions. People say it's 200, but it's dynamic. So depending on the size of your business, your sector, the types of questions which you'll have to answer change. But for example, it might say, are you as a business paying the living wage to your employees? What are your policies around parental leave? How progressive are they, for example? What's your plan for tackling the climate crisis and things like that? And so businesses go through that impact assessment. As I say, it's free to do that. But if you want to become a B Corp, this is the next stage. So you need to do the impact assessment. Each question has points. You need to score 80 points as a business. And at that point, you can press submit. And this is the key next step, which is that impact assessment gets checked by our team at B-Lab UK, and then it goes off for independent verification. So you've got to evidence what you're saying you're doing. You can't, and this starts to tackle those issues about greenwashing. It's very easy to say, hey, we love the planet. How are you actually doing it? And so that's the evidence behind it. Gets checked, and then eventually, after a few months, and it does take a while to get through that process for checking, because there's been such a volume of business going through it, you become a B Corp. That is not the end of the story. I mean, I say this to lots of people. It's like, you're at base camp, you're not at the top of Everest. This is where the hard work comes, where you need to sort of demonstrate how you can do more. I'll say one final thing, because I've realized I'm taking a lot of airtime here. But one thing I really want to just stress is this point about rigorousness. We are, at the moment, as a movement at B-Lab, looking at the standards and the process to become a B Corp. So we've got a whole project at the moment called Evolution of the Standards. So this point about scoring 80 points and things like that, businesses can get those points from different parts of the impact assessment, but you could have a situation where some businesses are doing really well in the environment, but less so on their social, in terms of how they look after their people. Is that really a good way to become a B Corp? So what we're trying to do is provide minimum standards across 10 areas for businesses. So we're moving the goalposts for businesses. We're making it harder, and I think we will continue to do that because we need to keep pushing businesses forward with that. But I can talk more about that later, but I'm going to give up space now.
Oh no, thank you, Kyle. And it leads me nicely to you, Graeme. You know, from your experience and position, how do companies develop and deliver, you know, long-term visions of sustainability, and you know, and any of the challenges associated to that?
Well, it's really difficult, really, because you're talking about a business completely, potentially changing what it does, its reason for being. And it takes a couple of key issues. It needs time, first of all, which is really difficult for a lot of businesses, especially if you're an SME and you don't have a dedicated sustainability person in your team. How do you get the time to think about this stuff and to plan? You need the awareness of what climate change is and how your business is going to be affected, and how you can potentially change. And then you need the agility to actually go about that journey, which means you also need things like courage and ambition and a desire to do things that might not have been done before in your sector. So it's really, really difficult. What we do on the programme I manage at the university, it's called Eco Innovation Northwest. We basically work with the SME community to try to rapidly put them through that process. And the key thing we do on that is really, we get businesses to think, what is the long-term future? What does that look like? Because if you're basing your business model on what the world looks like today, you've basically put a shelf life on your business, because the world is not going to look like what it looks like today. So we get businesses to think, what does the world look like in 2050 or 2038 maybe if you're in Manchester, and then say, how can your business not just survive but thrive in that future world? And we find that's a really big driver and really useful. The best feedback we ever got from that activity was a packaging company who said, we've been a packaging company for 30 years, we'll always be a packaging company, but if we want to really step up to this agenda, we need to be a packaging company that will eradicate packaging, which I just thought was so ambitious and just a wonderful vision to have. And I don't know what the manager said when she went back and told that to the company board, or maybe it didn't go down as well, but it was just a perfect level of ambition that we try to encourage.
So should we stop okay, this might be controversial, but should we stop talking about sustainability and talk about responsibility?
I think that is very helpful, because to me, if you think about what a sustainable world looks like, you've got to think about all the co-benefits that go along with sustainability. So we're talking about a cleaner, healthier, more efficient, happier, utopian society. That's how I envisage sustainability. So it's not just about the environment. The environment's important because it underpins everything, but then there's all these other aspects of society, community, and just doing the right thing.
Yeah, because and that's the thing. There's so much that that I genuinely believe that during lockdown it uncovered so many different things. And I think because we were stood still, and having to watch how how the planet was suffering, but also how people were suffering as well. So you find a lot of organisations are dealing with sustainability, but also on the other hand dealing with diversity and anti-racism and the community and how we love our people and planet, and making sure that it is their company actually does what it says on the tin. It was an interesting question you mentioned there, Carl, that asking maybe coming to you, Luke, about that journey to being B Corp. So
I'll try. But yeah.
I would say what have been any challenges, because like I said, it's not easy, but what are some of those challenges on that journey?
Being totally honest here, I'm very lucky that I joined a company that was well and firmly rooted as a B Corp when I joined, so I can't really talk about those challenges, but maybe you could, yeah.
So we're not a B Corp yet, but we have been through, we've submitted our impact report basically. So, and I would say that yes, of course, it is challenging, but if anything, it's just a really useful tool because it helps you find focus. It helps you, for us certainly, it's been part of the journey of unpicking what we're actually about and what we want to achieve, because that's that's always the starting point, isn't it? And I think even if you start by thinking, right, I want to do something, I want to be different, it's defining that difference, because as you were just saying, there are so many different routes that you can take, and finding the starting point. So, and because it's rigorous and because you have to work through your entire business, which is obviously easy when you are smaller than when you're a big corporation, but even so, it gives you the processes. It's almost like an entire roadmap to how to do it and what you need to do. So, I think it's amazing, but hard. Yeah.
Sorry, one thing I will say is that joining a company that was firmly established as a B Corp is that permeated the culture of every aspect of what we do. So coming in as a newbie to a B Corp, it really kind of gave me as an employee the direction to know where I was going and what I was doing and how that was making an impact.
Can I just say, I think that's really, really important. In my first ever environmental job, I was an environmental manager in an office, and I had this brainwave of tiny intervention, but to make people turn the monitors off at the end of the day, I put sweets on the desk of people who did it, and that worked for a little bit because people were like, "Oh, I'm going to get a sweet tomorrow if I do it." But then as soon as you stop rewarding them, they went back to the old habits because fundamentally they hadn't had a cultural shift where their values had changed, and so stuff like that's really important because if you can embed that into an organisation and into the people who work there, they'll turn the monitor off because they want to, because they think it's the right thing to do, not because they're going to get a Mars bar.
I think, but also, what are some of the barriers, when it comes to trying to, we're talking about the difference between sustainability and adopting responsibility, but what are some of the barriers for businesses?
For me, it's just that scale of change. I think there are costs associated to it. So in the last talk, somebody was mentioning we've got externalities. So businesses have basically evolved in this model where you externalize anything that isn't essentially related to profit. So things like the environment and society don't have any economic value assigned to them. So they're just used as a resource to exploit. So now we're seeing things come into place where businesses have to start internalizing all these external factors. And typically that's through things like economic pricing and policy, or we've had the clean air bill in Manchester that was going to come in. That meant a lot of the businesses coming onto our programme were panicking because they were like, how can we get a more sustainable vehicle fleet that we can afford? So it is expensive. But just having as I say, the awareness and the agility to change and to think is two of the key resources.
Same question for you, Kyle.
Yeah, sure. I think it's probably things like time and money as well, which are a lot of the challenges, and especially in the current sort of context and climate at the moment. Sort of a lot of businesses are just sort of fighting to survive, and so one of the things that we sort of face as a challenge is how do you get businesses sort of switch on to the fact that we're always going to have these sort of various crises that are happening, more sort of compounding, but we are in this kind of wider climate crisis. That's not going to away with that particular action. So how do we get businesses to get started? And so part of the work that we're doing and that sort of I'm looking at B Lab UK is like, how do we kind of break out situations, because I think a lot of people are in this room get it, but who's not in this room?
Yeah.
And so what can we do, it's probably my action point, but it's like, what can we do as amplification points to help other businesses or the people on this journey, or the people just walking outside on the street who are not here, to get them into the room and provide those support mechanisms. And I think one of the things we're looking at is like, what tools and support can we do for that? So we're developing kind of like new training courses, sort of free at the point of entry for people to get started. We're sort of trying to create communities. So we've got a great community here in Manchester, the B Local for Greater Manchester, that's looked after by B Corp. So they're plugged into sort of the current sort of like landscape. So talking to other organisations like the Good Employment Charter. So again, sort of going where the energy is. As well, and sort of like partnering up with different networks as well, and I know there's loads around Manchester as well. So I think that's part of it. It's just getting started having those conversations, which is useful. But yeah, it is hard, and I think one of the things that we're sort of trying to do as we grow as an organisation is kind of have our eyes and ears open. So we want to have those conversations with people. We want to kind of hear what are the challenges and where we can position ourselves to help as well. So yeah, there's a few things there.
So once people do become B Corp, it's not, you don't want to be complacent. It's not one of those ways like we've got it now. How do you make sure that those standards are being, they're staying at the same level or even better or higher?
Yeah, sure. So businesses that become B Corp have to recertify every 3 years. So you've got to go through the process again and again. So it's kind of definitely a marathon kind of thing. And so it's a complete switch in how you operate as an organisation. And as I said before, we're always moving the goalposts as well. I was like, sorry about that, but we're shifting it. And so one of the things that we have definitely doubled down on in the UK side of things is the emphasis on community. So we've got an entire team within B Lab UK just focused on that existing community of now over 1,000 B Corps. And so we've got an impact manager there who is working with existing B Corps, saying, okay, you've got your score here, how can you get better? And I think businesses sort of increase their score by sort of 7% over 3 years in our community. And we have quite a low attrition rate of businesses leaving it, so they're definitely seeing value in being part of that community. So it's challenging them, it's inspiring as well. And so I think certainly, sorry, Luke, I've brought you in it before because you didn't do the B Corp thing, the actual impact assessment. But I think what's lovely about Patagonia being here is like one of the really interesting things is like how does a business sort of completely transform its like way of operation? In terms of like governance structures and things like that, or what we heard from Faith and Nature about putting nature on the board. And I think you'll hear later if you join the talk with Erinch around donut economics as well. So part of the work they're doing is sort of how do you actually get businesses to think actually, okay, they've done the B Corp thing, they're sort of doing business kind of as usual, but a bit better. But how do they actually be a bit more radical and transformative? And I think that's what's really interesting about how we're sort of trying to inspire things like, what if they move to an employee ownership model, where employees are given the power of how the business operates. So we want to be those points or catalysts for further actions to the future as well. But I think it's the power of the community to do that, and businesses inspiring each other as well.
Do we have any questions? We've only got about 5 minutes for questions. Yeah?
I have one question. We're actually a B Corp, we're a pet food company. And one of our challenges this year is Joy is the lady who's behind all this, but actually going through the reaccreditation process. One of the challenges we have this year is embedding. in our business. So we have a lot of people who are really involved about doing the charity days. You know, they really want to do something, but it's the understanding within their role that they're kind of failing on. So as a business, we've put a business objective, an objective on everybody's annual reviews around B Corp, but it's really embedding that in the business. If you have any other ideas that you could share, particularly from a Patagonia perspective of what you've seen coming in, that would be really helpful for us.
Yeah, I mean, to go to what you were talking about earlier, actually, is have you looked at carbon literacy training for your individuals? Because that, great, yeah. You know, carbon literacy, I'm proud to say, are one of our 1% for the Planet grantees. We as a store sit and we decide actually who we're going to vote for. I mean, 1% for the Planet is another really easy way to make your team own it. You know, we've got a small team in the store, there's only 10 of us, but 3 times a year we sit around at a table, we present applications from local NGOs and groups, and then we decide democratically who we're going to support, and you can guarantee that my team feels a lot more ownership over that.
Any more questions?
Can I just say what I learned in the last 3 days? The messaging around the seed thing. So I've learned that actually if you plant the seed and share the knowledge and stop being a gatekeeper, then everybody will learn. And I think that's been very powerful for me in the last few days. I've been responsible of gatekeeping because I want to suck up all the knowledge, but actually that doesn't help anybody. So that's what I wanted to share.
I love that. We have a lot of gatekeepers, don't we?
Yeah.
But sometimes we don't even realise we're gatekeeping.
No, exactly. Yeah.
You know, and I think that's from something that was from the previous panel when we were talking about, you know, that ethical bubble of we're saying we want to be ethical, but yeah, we're judging other people who aren't as ethical as us.
Everyone starts out bad, so you know, there's a lot of press around Nespresso being
Yeah.
B Corp, but actually you have to help the bad people become good people so that
Yeah.
they start the journey somewhere.
Exactly. Any more comments or questions? Yeah. Don't be shy, guys. Don't be shy. We're a family.
Thank you. Yeah, my question is sort of for the future, how to stop B Corp becoming, you know, just a label that people are striving to get, and actually the stuff they should be doing that before they even go for B Corp. Does that make sense? So how you can stop it becoming a box ticking exercise. And then the second thing is I work on ethical brands, and I know some of the really small brands that I work with, they're like rebels and they've been doing circular economy for, you know, 10 years, but they don't go for B Corp because I think they feel it's like they might be neurodiverse, so to go through that whole like filling in lots of data, it doesn't appeal to them, or they're doing it anyway, so they don't feel the benefits. And then obviously then the greenwashing comes in, and bigger companies could maybe get B Corp, but actually I'm thinking of Brewdog as an example, because they were B Corp, weren't they? And they, not that ethical. So yeah, it's a bit of a kind of question around the whole B Corp thing in the future for it.
Thank you for that. I think I'd probably point to that point of rigorousness as well, and the fact we're not resting on our laurels. Because if we wanted just more business, if we just lower the standards to sort of like draw everyone in. So I think the fact you've got those examples of businesses that were formerly B Corps, is one thing in terms of like the community changes, and also it'd be interesting to see with the new standards, how does that impact on businesses going through? So I think that's the rigorousness is a key thing we're sort of leaning into in terms of sort of trying to keep it kind of razor sharp as well. But I think the other thing as well is to sort of like speak to people like yourselves when we're doing this whole work around evolution of standards to get feedback from the wider community about how do we ensure that that doesn't happen as well. So that's my sort of call to action on that point. In terms of just other businesses that are not going down the B Corp, it's a really interesting thing as well, because I've had a conversation with Andrew. I was talking to you about sort of businesses based in Liverpool. We've been doing some research as well with businesses led by underrepresented business founders. So like, we don't need a certification to tell us that we're doing good. And I think that's okay. But what we want to do is like, how do we get those stories to help inspire other businesses who are not there yet? And I think we've got a role to play in terms of amplifying those other businesses as well. The point on neurodiversity is very interesting. We're exploring that because I think there is stuff that we can do to help people on that journey more. And it's definitely something there. So if there's anyone interested on that point, very open to have conversations about that, certainly.
And I think that's such a good point, because you always find companies who are just you know, they are radical and they're just getting on with it, you know, and they're sometimes the ones that do miss out on funding because they haven't got the time actually to be filling out paperwork and stuff like that. So, yeah, that's a really good point. Any more questions before we close off? No? No? Yeah.
Sorry.
Would it ever make sense to almost have like a baby B Corp for smaller businesses? Because one of the reasons that my company to date has not done the B Corp assessment is we're a really small team, we're rapidly growing, we're trying to establish ourselves as a company before we're able to devote the time and energy needed to fill out the forms. And would it ever make sense to say, okay, well, Nescafe have got, you know, a team of 50 people looking at this, maybe it makes sense to have a more rigorous assessment for them, whereas Innovative Energy Consultants, plug in my company, has got a team of 1 full-time and 3 part-time people. It's not really realistic for them to complete the form at the same rigor as quickly and easily. It's not to say we won't ever do it, but it can't be a priority today. So I think my question is, does everyone else feel like that? And would it make sense for a standard like B Corp to, like 1% of the planet has different levels that you can come in at depending on how big your business is to have something like that? That was a very long way of asking a very short question, sorry.
I think I also have a quite short answer, which is, have you seen Pending B Corp?
No.
There's a Pending B Corp status which exists for businesses in their first year of existence. So I think that's recognising that business is kind of in those early stages as well. So there's something there.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So I think the additional answer on top of that in terms of the actual answer about sort of size is, I think one of the things we're exploring as well is probably like creating those sort of trainings and community spaces because...
But that takes time. Training takes time.
Well, I think the thing is, though, is that, going back to my earlier point, is like there is that rigorousness to go through, and I'd hope as a smaller business you're probably a bit more agile. You're not in a larger business or trying to find like 15 different answers from multitudes of people. But I totally recognise that if you're trying to keep your business going as a sort of 1 or 2 person operation and trying to do this on top, it's very hard. So I think, again, this is in that space why I'd love to have conversations to see what more can we do and how can we collectively try and offer that support. The other thing I would just say is that the B Leader community as well, our consultants help businesses, but some of them have offerings as well, which are kind of at a lower rate designed specifically for businesses, which are in those formative stages at a sort of cheaper rate, but still guide people through that process. So I can do a bit of signposting for you on that as well.
So we're a small business as well, and what we've done is worked in a group. So my particular group was, I think it was 7 women run with businesses, and we did it together. So we went through each question. We had a session a week, sometimes a bit bigger gap, and basically gave us some deadlines, and we helped each other with some of the questions, and that broke it down basically and gave us a rigor, because that's sometimes what stops you as well. Well, certainly speaking for myself, in terms of actually getting it done. So working together might work.
Thank you.
No, I totally get what you're saying, because I think if you are 1 full-time member of staff with 3 part-time, if it's your business, it's very hard to want to put a lot of that extra work on staff members. So I totally get what you're saying. So I think there's a lot of conversation that needs to be had when it comes to B Corp certification and the different levels, as you mentioned. Because also, I think I'm in this space of not putting too much pressure on yourself, and also what does B Corp mean to you? If you're already doing the job, do you need it? And can you do it at a later stage as well? I'm really planning it out, but not putting too much pressure on yourself when you're actually doing amazing work. So it's time to take action. Luke, what action would you like the team to go away with?
I missed the end of the last talk, so sorry if I'm repeating anyone here. But the most impactful action that I was ever told at a talk like this a while ago was to look at your personal bank account, look at your business bank account, look at your pension. How are they investing it, and does that align with your values?
I would say, because obviously I'm in marketing, and with that, and to avoid greenwash, is really to double down on what it is you're trying to achieve, and then know your stuff in your space. So whatever space you're in and whatever you're trying to achieve, know the things that you need to do in that space, and then that's the way around it. And making sure you stay on the right side. You've got the mic.
Thank you. One thing I've not touched upon in a huge amount of detail is the Better Business Act campaign as well. So we're running or working with a campaign to change the Companies Act, Section 172, which is essentially embedding kind of changes to the statute around directors' duties. And so if that gets passed, essentially all companies will have to look after social and environmental factors. And that's kind of the sort of scaling up kind of point we're trying to push towards. So I'd encourage you to look into the Better Business Act and join that coalition, 1,500 businesses, please.
For me, it would be just trying to have a clear vision of where you want your business to go and what that end goal of sustainability looks like. Because once you've got that, you can then do what we call in academia, you can do something called backcasting, where you can look at where you are today and come up with like practical steps to show how you're going to get there. Because to me, if you don't have any sort of certification, if you can just demonstrate to people that this is what you stand for, this is where you want to go, and this is how you're going to get there, and you communicate that honestly and transparently on a regular basis, for me, you're a responsible organisation who's showing a real commitment to change. And if you've got a plan like that, you're going to be a lot more likely to be able to deliver on it. Whereas if you go a bit more aimlessly with just a vague vision, it can be a lot more challenging. So try to have a clear picture in your mind and think how you're going to get there is really powerful.
Fantastic. Goodness. A big round of applause for our panellists, please. Thank you very much.